Object Snap Mode. In this lesson, we will familiarize ourselves with the types of object snap modes, with its settings, as well as the temporary override of the snap. And the first thing we will start with is defining what is object snap. Object snap is the main and fastest way to accurately indicate so-called characteristics points on objects without knowing their coordinates. Characteristic points, for example, include endpoints and the midpoint of a segment. Note that each snap has its own representation. That is, if it's an endpoint, it's square; if it's a midpoint, it's a triangle. Next, the center of an arc or circle. Snap to a point is called a node. Also, snap to a polyline. You can immediately see that these are endpoints and a midpoint. Next, snap to a dimension and a text insertion point, which is the same, as you can see, with text, block insertion, and attribute definition. Thus, the object snap mechanism allows you to indicate one of the characteristic points of an existing object as coordinates for the point of a new object. You can use object snap whenever the command line prompts you to select the first point, or specify a point. To enable permanent object snap, you need to open the Drawing Modes dialog. Setup, Object Snap tab. Using checkboxes, you can indicate all necessary modes and click OK. You can also enable permanent snap from context menu, Snap button. Similarly, here you can clear all, select all, or assign only those snaps you need. It's possible to enable multiple modes simultaneously, except for the one-time snap context menu, which is activated by holding down the Control or Shift key and right-clicking in the drawing area. A one-time object snap is typically used to replace a permanent object snap and remains active only until the current operation is completed. You can also use keywords in the command line to call a one-time object snap. For instance, the keyword in the command line is snap, and you can immediately select either Drawing Modes or the Object Snap button. Now, let's briefly discuss each snap individually. To do this, reopen the context menu of the Object Snap button, choose Deselect All, and leave only the endpoint active. Activate Line Creation. And this object snap will adhere to the nearest endpoint of the line. If it's a line, then to the line's endpoint, same with an arc or polyline. Also, you can snap to dimension lines. That's all. In this simple manner, we can snap to every point most precisely. The next snap is midpoint. This snap is used to locate the midpoint on objects such as an arc, line, and so on. On each side of this triangle, we can find the midpoint. Similarly, we can find the midpoint of an arc. You cannot find the midpoint for a circle and a point. We can't find the midpoint here because it's a spline. There are multiple midpoints for each segment. We can also find the midpoint for other objects, except for texts. In this manner, we can construct a triangle using the midpoints of the sides of an external triangle, as an example. The next snap is center. Accordingly, this snap is to the center of a circle, arc, ellipse, elliptical arc, and so on. From one center, you can snap to another and proceed with the construction of the desired object, whatever we need. The next snap up is node. And this snap is to a point object, as well as to a dimension-defining point. Or, alternatively, to the starting point of the dimension text. The next snap is quadrant. Let's check immediately. On a circle, the snap is to the nearest quadrant. Meaning, points are located on an arc or circle, and accordingly, an ellipse. Or on an ellipse at angles 0, 90, 180 and 270 degrees from the center. Let's try with an arc. One quadrant, then two quadrants. Next is the intersection snap. This snap allows you to connect to the intersection point of objects, line segments, circles, and so on. We have a bit of a choice here. But still, it exists. And we have the intersection of objects on a circle. We also have the line on an arc, which we did last time. And similarly, we can snap here. Next is insertion. Insertion, then we will select a line. The snap is to the insertion point of text, a block, shape, or attribute. In this case, text. The first insertion point, accordingly, of the text. Here, we have inserted a dimension. And we cannot snap to other objects anymore. Next is the perpendicular. This mode allows you to identify the intersection of the perpendicular with the object. It's more evident when you are drawing, and you see the very perpendicular line pointing to a certain type of object, or with its imaginary continuation. All objects using the perpendicular mode will be drawn strictly at 90-degree angle, meaning perpendicular to something. The next mode is tangent. Let's create an arc and test the tangent on it. Choose a line. The same selection for the first tangent point, and on the circle, we can also choose a tangent point. The next mod is nearest, which allows snapping to the point of an object closest to the cursor crosshair. This mode is enabled by default. You can disable it in the settings. We will talk about this a bit later and move on to the next mode, apparent intersection. Apparent intersection works in tandem with other modes. Let's look at a rectangle example, then select a line. We enable the midpoint and apparent intersection modes. Let's enable O-track. By hovering over the rectangle sides, using the apparent intersection, you can identify a neutral point of the rectangle at the intersection of two midpoints. In this way, you can start the drawing right from here. Here, it's searching for the midpoint of the next line segment. That is, it's a kind of object tracking that helps to find the point of an imaginary intersection. The next mode is parallel. This drawing mode allows the construction of lines parallel to the selected ones. So, you see, a parallel line is automatically drawn relative to this line. If we create a line at an angle, let's deactivate to the midpoint, and construct parallel to this line. An auxiliary line will appear, allowing us to easily draw two parallel lines. That's all for object snaps. Let's briefly discuss raster snap settings. The raster snap mode is useful, and to use the raster snap, you need to open a raster image. Go to the raster tab and use the raster snap. Select any raster. Now, let's go to the raster snap settings and discuss these parameters. We can specify the maximum width and maximum length of recognized raster objects, as well as the maximum break that will be ignored. Let's keep all the current settings and press OK. Next, we will activate the raster objects. Then choose the line and see how we can snap to the raster image. We can see that it recognizes the type of raster object, highlights it, and makes the snap. But it's worth noting that all of this is bundled together and you can separately adjust the raster snap. But that's basically all about object snap for us. We will delve deeper into them of snaps in practice.